exciting time of year for all Division I football and head football coaches around the country. Probably the most excited is my wife, who considers today's signing day the end of the season. So August begins the season, and today actually finishes the season to where there becomes some semblance of regular life again, which I think we're all, at least in the coaching profession, excited for. I have a really strong and hardworking coaching staff when it comes to recruiting. I would say that the effort that this particular staff put in, the diligence and how long they battled and how hard they battled and the amount of hours logged, I think superseded that of any other staff that I might have been associated with. I knew when I hired this staff that they would be strong on the field. I thought they would be very much aligned and compatible in terms of culture. I didn't know that they would be as strong a recruiters as they were, and so to them I appreciate their efforts and all that they've done for helping this to help it make this a great class. As we start looking through the slides, I'll give you an overview of the program and then kind of go into the recruits specifically, and then I'll be leaving most of the time to take questions. I think our program is in a very unique position right now, as the haves in college football are intending through not only oversight but rule changes to have more, and the have-nots that possibly can't keep up budgetarily being the primary focus, knowing that of the 125 Division I programs, only 25 are run in the black. And so with this intent for those possible 25 that would like to continue to separate by resources, that leaves BYU in a very unique position as we are standing alone as an independent. As we stand alone, more and more focus has to go not only on myself as the head coach, but on our program of producing quality victories, number of victories on the biggest stages and against the best opponents. Because it will be a fight for positioning in the national marketplace and in the world of college football. And so our coaches know that, I know that, I believe the institution knows that. And so the urgency of which not only bringing great talent into the program is relevant, but then producing victories, again, on the biggest stages against the best opponents is the direction we're going. What has happened in the past, as you look at it, the state of our current program, only 17 programs have been able to be ranked as frequently as we have of the 125. I give myself a buffer. As we all know, my first year I had no idea what I was doing as the head coach, so this says 8 of the last years, not 9. But we, I think, are gaining momentum still. The number of teams that we're playing that are quality teams, how we're playing them, especially from a year ago to this year, I love the direction, with still work to go. But there'll be more of the same as you look at scheduling coming forward. I think we're already having and have a great baseline. I'm not satisfied, and I certainly want more. The next part, in terms of our record, I'm proud of our record. We win a lot of football games. That's what happens at BYU. That's what the expectation is at BYU. To this point, and due to the great research and marketing people that we have, but also those that love statistics, there are those that have made a very strong analogy. I think it might be just one game difference now between the record that the program has had in my 9 years and Coach Edwards' first years. And so I'm honored to be able to try to match the tempo that he set, certainly not claiming that I am him, nor the program is the same, but I do recognize the expectation that Coach Edwards set, and I would love to be able to maintain that and do my part to continue the legacy. As we know, tradition is a super a part of what I believe in and our program. Okay? Where we are now, it's hard to play in the postseason. It's not only hard to play in the postseason, it's hard to win in the postseason. Our program over the past 9 years has gone to a postseason game every year for 9 years. That's hard to do. We've won 6 of the 9. I would certainly have liked to have won them all. We had won 4 straight going into this past year, but I like our record, I like the direction, and I expect us to play postseason every year. And the idea is to play better and better games on bigger and bigger stages and to continue the same in terms of our expectation to win. Next, one of the unique things regarding marketing and positioning is that as an independent, we need a strong partner to be seen. ESPN, not only do they help us be seen, but they also help us schedule. And the direction that we just went a year ago, and that direction will continue, as you'll see as schedules are announced all the way up to maybe 2025. the quality of teams we're going to be playing and the volume of those teams and the stages we're going to be playing on with quality exposure. That's certainly one part of the formula, and that is happening now. My job is to ensure that the program wins and competes at a level that continues to help us manageable, or to help us stay manageable and competitive in the marketplace. And then lastly, in more regards to what BYU and ESPN have done together, not only as you're looking at the monitor, the number of games in comparison to the number of other teams that are playing on similar stages and being seen by similar people. This, by the way, is excluding BYUTV. So that's another 55 million homes. So if you add this independent of BYUTV, it's powerful in and of its own right. When you add BYUTV to that, independence has been very, very good for us. And so that's from kind of a marketplace perspective and the national world of BYU football, where we are not only in how much we're winning, how frequently we're playing in the postseason, but how much we're being seen. All those things are relevant to BYU football. All right, now in terms of what the class looks like, as we always talk about, BYU has a unique element and a larger element than anyone else in the country in terms of a unique population of not only LDS church members, but returned missionaries. So what we did is we took a very quick snapshot of what next year's fall roster might look like. There could be a change here or there, but of 123 players on the roster, right at 86 to 90% of our team will be members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So 86 to 90%. Right approaching 70%, 66 to 68% will be returned missionaries of our entire team. So that's, again, approaching 7 of 10 that will be returned missionaries. Now, in terms of non-members, that will be anywhere from 10 to 14%. I'm talking now about young people that are members of other faiths. When you consider now African-American young people, that means parents on both sides, that's about 13%, or 13 players. If you add another 10% of mixed race, that's 23%, which is about a quarter of our team now that has a diverse population in terms of culture. Polynesian percentages, second largest in all of college football. And so even though there's a return missionary element, a church membership, there's quite a bit of diversity, and about 10 to 11 to 13% larger than what the university at large has. These players are the return missionary component for this particular class. Easy to forget about them as they're out there serving. Not only says where they're from, or excuse me, not only says who they are, but where they've been serving. Probably just the couple to highlight would be those that hadn't played or been at BYU first, as you know, and probably have some history of those that did play first. As you look at it, the first number, or the first name, is Troy Hines. Troy Hines was one of the most highly sought after state of Utah recruits in maybe ever. Davis High School, big, fast, strong, a fantastic athlete, but will be returning from Jackson, Mississippi to us in June. Next, if you look at Stephen Richards, defensive lineman, played tight end at Alta High School. He has not been with us yet. He'll be returning. Others, as you look at who possibly is new that you haven't seen yet, you'll see Brian Rollinson, an offensive lineman. He'll be joining the program for the first time. Actually is already enrolled and playing. And then when you see Matt Sumption and Corbin Kafusi, tight end from Springville, and we're projecting Corbin as an offensive lineman. Now he's 6'8" since he's been on his mission. A couple more inches and grown. And so about 5 years of eligibility with the frame similar to Bronson's except taller at this point. So these are the guys that are coming back that maybe you'd forgotten about or hadn't seen, in addition to some that have already played. A couple things in terms of what we were looking for. Not only did we need specific needs met, which is predominantly at wide receiver and at outside linebacker. Those two needs would have been first and foremost. So we really expanded where we were going to find them, knowing that with the mission age change, the number of spots we have is small this year, and it will be smaller again next year. That's directly proportionate to the LDS Church approving young men to serve missions at 18. So we have more players leaving first, which means more are now coming back at the same time. We've thrown our net farther from North Carolina to Alabama, then into Texas and into Kansas, and then the rest are fairly similar with Arizona, Utah, California. But we're finding that with a player personnel director in Jeff Martson, who is exceptional, and with his resources and knowledge that he's gained at the University of Alabama and at Boise, he's helped us be much more efficient, cover more ground in less time than what we have been able to do before. So that shows you where the states the kids are from. Now, in terms of the people, our offensive class, predominantly, again, our first need was wide receiver, being more volatile on the outside in terms of being able to stretch a defense laterally, to have them concerned about keeping focus off Taysom and Jamal, but also vertically, meaning be able to run by him. We think that'll help us score more points against the best opponents. We're still over 30 points a game, but when you start to look at who the best opponents are and what our scoring production is there, we need more. We know that means more wide receivers. We believed we had enough depth going into the year. I thought it was one of our strengths. As the year went on, through injuries and attrition, we ended up not as strong as what we had hoped to be. The first 4 players, as you look at them, are all wide receivers, 2 of which are 2 of the best junior college players in the country at wide receiver, very highly recruited. A third is a transfer that will graduate in engineering from UTEP, and will have 1 year left to play. So we have experience and depth, adding 3 wide receivers and a high school player in Trey Dye, son of former player James Dye. So the top row are wide receivers. The first of the second row is a tight end, which we know we need tight ends that can not only block but catch the football well. And then we have 3 offensive linemen, including a center, in our class. If you switch to the defensive side, what you'll see is, again, needs being met exactly. So not only Tyler Cook, but Sione Takitaki and Fred Warner and Isaiah Kafusi, those 4 players are all exceptional linebackers. 3-4 defense, you have to have exceptional linebackers. And just as I got the approval, we've been battling head-to-head with a young man that had committed to Stanford, who today chose BYU, and his first name is Uriah. And as you watch him, even though we couldn't put him on, he just made his announcement, and from Compton High School, and a fantastic player, another linebacker, an outside backer who's very, very skilled. Kavika Fanua at safety, Michael Shelton at corner. So a couple secondary needs with Isaiah Kafusi being able to play outside linebacker like Brian Keel, but possibly being able to run well enough to maybe even play safety. So we love the athleticism there, and very similar to what Brian Keel did for us at BYU. The bottom row, as you look at those guys, size. Starting with Isaiah Kafusi, outside linebacker, more of a will body type, fantastic edge rusher, brother of one of our current players, Kaimana Nakua. Will be a mission-first player, and then 4 giant defensive linemen. Zach Daw, one of the best wrestlers in all of the country from Pleasant Grove and one of the hardest workers. Tico Funga, younger brother of Romney Funga. One of the unique stories in the class, Jett Arias Gully, all the way from Alabama. Probably 6'2", 320-pound nose tackle. And then Earl Mariner, cousins with Travis Tuiloma. And so we've added size up front, we've added fierce athleticism at linebacker, and we've added enough secondary players to help us be good again on defense. So that's what the class looks like. I'll be glad at this point to take questions that I haven't already addressed, or regarding specific players if you have specific questions.
Bronco, would you say that this year you were in on more guys late than ever before? And if so, why was that? Is that a philosophy switch?
Yeah, I would say with fewer numbers and increased urgency and competition, we set our sights. We've always set it high, but we set it as high as possible. What allowed for that to happen, for us to compete right to the very end. In fact, there was really only one player right at the very, very end that didn't choose BYU. He hadn't committed either way yet that we thought we might have a great chance at, and I thought of as of last night we might have. But Jeff Martson, our player personnel director, his coordination of where our coaches were going, we eliminated so many players that weren't quite good enough and a different tier, so we started on them earlier. We were on them more effectively. We were more thorough in their recruiting. We built relationships longer, which eventually won the day in terms of quality of players that came to BYU. So having a player personnel director for the first time since I've been the coach, someone besides a coach trying to coordinate recruiting efforts, that someone that's just doing that full time, that made a giant impact on our program, with a graduate assistant by the name of Preston Hadley helping Jeff. Those two in that department allowed us to be faster, more efficient, and more effective to where we could compete to the end longer.
Bronco, can you talk about the recruitment of Isaiah and Naku and what transpired there?
Man, it's a wild story. We early on, after Isaiah's junior year, believed he would be ready and wanted to come to BYU after playing at Gorman High School in Nevada. Moved then to the state of Utah to play at Timpview. Along the way, like a lot of young men do, makes unique choices, and at one point decided, no, I don't think I want to come to BYU. I'd like to consider elsewhere. We kind of went back and forth at least 2 times on that similar trend. Isaiah then started to be influenced by a lot of great people in our community in terms of ecclesiastical leaders and in terms of direction, and still has some work to do academically. But I was convinced as of about a week ago that not only did this young man want BYU, he was sincere about it. He's planning to serve a mission first, so he has some academic work to do and some mission work to do first. And I'll be completely at peace after that time frame that he'll belong and want to be with us. And I would love to see his mom have both boys play at the same spot. And that had a lot to do with it as well. And so that's how it worked.
Bronco, can you talk about, you mentioned the guys going on missions, those that are coming back. Do you feel like you've got a pretty good grasp of who's going to be immediately contributing as opposed to those that you're looking more over a longer time span?
I think what I can share is who will play first and who will go on missions first. In terms of the contribution, that's hard to say. That's almost more based on what our needs are, what we know we need. We need receivers to play right away and play well, and we need some receivers to play right away and play well. If you look at the rest of the positions, I can't say that we need urgency that way. We have some players that are going to play first, but the 2 things that had to happen is receivers that were qualified to play right away and some linebackers that were qualified to play right away, even if they're freshmen. The system that we're playing now and the number of plays we're playing on both sides, we believe we're going to need a lot of freshmen to contribute in some capacity, maybe up to 22 plays a game, through special teams and a role on offense and defense to help us get through the season at the tempo we play. I learned that a year ago. So these young guys, even though if they're not at a huge position of immediate need, they could pass someone that's existingly in our program, or they could be a dominant special teams player or a contributor, which we're going to need. So the thought of just automatically having guys redshirt, that philosophy is quite different now. I'm looking for them to play and play as fast as possible.
Coach, you just battled Stanford for the services of Uriah Ayatoa, but you also battled USC for Fred Warner. Many of these kids reaffirmed or actually got their kind of a testimony of that BYU is where they need to be this past weekend. Talk about your involvement in recruiting this past weekend over the big recruiting.
I believe we went head-to-head against USC on 4 recruits. They got 1, we got 3, if you're talking about head-to-head. And the number of players, especially that aren't church members, with over 10-plus offers that then chose BYU, it's the highest ever in the history of our school. The relationships that our coaches built with them and them being able to present exactly what happens at BYU was really effective. Now when you talk about competing with Stanford, we compete against Stanford frequently. And in Uriah's case, what a great decision by him. Super strong academically. The family is absolutely one of the best homes I've ever been in Compton. Faith-based. All the sisters have graduate degrees and are off doing great things. So a faith-based, strong academic household with a young man that's a great football player. He is BYU, and that he chose us. After already having committed and agonizing all the way through last night over where he was going to be, that was the highlight of our day. Not that he's more important, but just to see a young man put that much time and effort into his decision and then chose BYU.
Realizing that individuals make decisions on their own and why things are important to them, has there been an overriding sentiment from guys that committed to you for this class that seems to be familiar?
I would say there's probably 3 points. I couldn't say just one point that maybe has resonated or come back, but there's probably 3 things that I've heard frequently from why they've chosen BYU. Relationships is first. And what I underestimated, our staff, this current staff, and how hard they work and how well they relate to these kids and how much the players, the recruits know that they care about them and their trust in this direction we're going and the amount of time they spent together, relationships were critical. And so I've heard that a lot. They love the schematic part of what we're doing offensively and defensively, knowing that we had specific needs. So that I would group that as a second thing, knowing there's a need for them, and then what we're doing fits them. So they like that a lot, and they could see themselves in their future within a specific role. So it wasn't just come to BYU. They knew what position they were going to be playing, how they were going to be used, and what impact that was going to make. So a very specific plan was really important. But then ultimately it came down to the environment. The environment inclusive of BYU means values, and it means the education, and it means like-minded people. And that was whether they were a member of the LDS faith or not. They loved the environment. And so those three things are what resonated most.
Coach, could you tell us a little bit more about the recruitment of a couple of the receivers, Leslie and Blackmon?
Sure. So with Blackmon, a really interesting story. And from what I've understood from my assistants, like on a day like today, ESPN will have the top 100 or 300, and they'll say where they're going, and the press will be watching. And he was one of those type of players coming out of high school, and chose the University of Oregon. Went there and was not successful, not only on a social level, but on an academic level. And in his words, too much too fast with not enough maturity. Was then kicked back to a junior college, and what I'm convinced of in visiting with him is he not only wants BYU, he wants to prove that he can be at BYU with all the unique standards, and also knows that he can help our football team. And so there are plenty of players that come to BYU already qualified in every area. There are some that need BYU, which then I say, okay, do you want BYU? Devon Blackmon needs it, wants it, and loves the role that he can play as a football player as well. And he's it's a bright story. I really would love to see it end well, meaning that he comes to BYU and has great success. And that would be a nice finish and conclusion to his college life book, so to speak. In terms of Jordan Leslie, was that the other one, Jordan Leslie? Jordan is a unique story. He will graduate from UTEP as their leading receiver this spring with a degree in engineering. So after he's graduated, he has 1 year left to play. He is the stepson of our receiver coach, Guy Holliday. And so there was a family relationship. Coach Holliday had coached him. However, this decision really became Jordan's in wanting a different place and acknowledging what BYU was and wanting to be part of that for 1 year after graduation. So that's our first player that's ever had graduated from another institution and wanted. And it's a unique position to be in, kind of for one. And so I had to be convinced this is really what he wanted, more than from just a football perspective.
Coach, through social media these days, we're able to kind of follow recruits' thought processes as they go through the recruiting timeline. And something happens after visits to BYU, it seems, with a lot of these guys. Can you tell us what goes on in visits that shows up with these guys then committing to you sometimes?
It is this unique connection that these kids make from all over the country where the activities we do, so for instance, without giving away too much, we were shooting paintballs at each other on Friday night, and paint dripping off all of us, myself included, and guys just, holding different spots that had been hit and lying exhausted on the battlefield, so to speak, and then coming out and telling stories about, I got you and you got, and they acted like they were best friends right from the beginning, and they realized as they start talking, and I think the first night they stayed up till maybe, I know the parents knew this, so I'm not going to disclose anything, but they stayed up in the lobby of the hotel sharing each other's stories, why they were there on the trip, and they found similarities. And what they find is while they've been in relative isolation, maybe at different parts in the country, in the minority, they came here and there was, I don't even remember how many we had on the visit, and they found likeness. And they were comforted by that, and they were unified in a unique way that they wanted to be part of that. And it's hard to separate them at the end of the visit. I mean, they're getting ready to go on flights, and just to get them to quit hugging each other and talking to each other, and parents exchanging emails and contact info. I mean, our coaches then have to race them and probably hurry faster than what they should to get them to the airport because they just kind of want to linger in that place. And unlike any place I've ever been. And what they say as recruits, it's they've never seen anything like it. And what our coaches who have been in other places say, they've never seen anything like it. And then the parents then that have accompanied them at other places say, we've never seen anything like it. That was the strongest this year of any year that I've been the coach. And so I think we're just doing a better job of attracting young men and educating them of what they're getting in for, not only by talent, but by qualifications or what this really could do for them. And it becomes a lot more fun. Recruiting isn't as, even though it's long and hard, it's just more fun to see them really like the possibility of where they've chosen.
Coach, can you talk a little bit more about Jett Arias, goalie, who had a really expedited recruiting process, but can you talk about him?
Yeah, a super fast turnaround with Jett Arias. You know what's nice is to have young men come that don't know much about a place like BYU and instantly appreciate it. No preconceived notions other than the half or partial or non-truths that they hear from others about the LDS Church and BYU, and then be brave enough to say, you know what, I want to go see for myself, and then travel all the way across the country, even though others are telling him it's not going to be for you, and he comes and absolutely loves it. We got a video link, as of most of the country did, as a coach out there saying, I've got a fantastic player that's developed in this unique time frame a little bit later than others. I watched the film and loved him, and he thought he fit our system perfectly, so we sent a coach out instantly. I think we were the first to respond. It was kind of like a race to see who. So we found him. We instantly got him set up for a visit. Then we sent another coach out to watch him, and so he knew we were serious because the number of coaches we sent and the amount of time, others followed, and we were even offering up to the day before he came on the trip, 3 others. They were just after us. And so Jett Arias comes on his visit, is a perfect fit at nose tackle in the 3-4, kind of Casey Hampton-ish like as a body type. And Jett Arias comes from really humble circumstances and was so appreciative of the care he got, but also the values. So he is much like my son Cutter. In 1 year in school, he read over 400 books. He loves literature. And so this guy comes as a nose tackle. That's usually not the connection you'd make stereotypically. And he loves to read. And he lives a very clean and socially conservative lifestyle. And it was like, there's a place like this? And it just seemed to be a great fit. He doesn't know everything about BYU. We tried to educate him as fast as we could, but just the instant reaction was such that he was smiling and I was smiling, and we thought, yeah, we know enough. And so what I told him is I'm going to offer him a scholarship, but I don't want his answer. And he kept kind of wanting to say, but, and I kept talking, and he goes, I want you to go home, talk to your mom, etc. And he goes, Coach, I want to come. And I said, okay, didn't you hear what I just said? I mean, I want you to wait. And said, it's not going to matter. I want to come. And he was persistent, and so I took his commitment on his visit. And that's fun for me. Sometimes the more familiar you are with the place, kind of the less enamored you become or appreciative of what it is because it's close. He came and recognized something special right away, and man, I would love to see that work out successfully for him and us. So yeah, unique story. It's kind of the condensed version of recruiting in terms of the amount of time and knowledge, but we did the Cliff Notes version on both sides.
Bronco, you mentioned earlier just how pleased you were with your entire coaching staff and how they recruited. Specifically, in 1 year's time, Coach Holliday has clearly found a very sincere passion for BYU sports and BYU athletics. Yeah. What can you talk about specifically about his influence on this class?
There's 2 things. Sometimes adversity that you face gives you a very clear perspective of where you are and why. Coach Holliday in the recruiting process this year had a lot of unique experiences, not only about why he chose BYU, but it got specific not only personally but faith-wise, and he loves it here. And so he ended up making a stand for why he's here and what he really likes. And I think he ended up having a unique place. And from what I understand, I think Jay asked me last week or something about Twitter or social media. I forget when that was. So I wasn't really following any of that. But he loves it here. And so for our players that either aren't members of the LDS Church but love the values, or that just want to be and believe that our program can help them develop into great men, he believes that sincerely. And so not only on our own team, there are a lot of players that are looking for an influence or an example like that as they're away from home that they might see as similar. And he's done a really nice job of kind of shepherding and having stewardship there, not specific only to that group, but for our team. But then when you consider now how our recruiting base is expanding, he's had a really strong influence for good, and it's been helpful.
Coach, in covering recruiting this year, a lot of the recruits mentioned how they loved it when they interacted with you on on last weekend. One of those things you mentioned, paintball. A lot of them kind
Don't
of
underestimate me on the paintball
yeah,
field, by the way.
they said that you were fearless on the paintball court, but they also wondered if they're going to get paybacks during pursuit drills.
So here's the problem with paintball with recruits. And by the way, when you paintball with recruits, there's also hosts, which are your current players. So we divided into a team, 2 teams. And so I was actually working against the team that was here. The most shots that I took were in the back. So how can that happen if those guys, I'm shooting this way until I realized most of my current players were behind me, and I took more, I didn't get hit once in the front, but my back was just pummeled with shots. So I think there was some payback there, and I think maybe that's what the recruits liked, is seeing our current players really get after me. And my kids liked it too, from what they told me. It was fun. Anything else? Yeah.
Bronco, we know that you got Fred Warner and lost Damian Mama to USC. Can you remember the other 2 players that you beat them on?
USC, yeah. So Nick Kurtz was one, and Uriah, thank you, was the other.
And then also, we learned today that Baker Pritchard signed with Oregon State.
Yeah.
Can you tell us
Sure.
kind of what happened there?
Right. It might have been days or a week or 2. I don't remember the exact time frame, but quickly after Baker came home from his mission, he, to his credit, set an appointment, came into my office with his father, and really, and I think we both acknowledged, he came to BYU a lot because of his brother when he was coming out of high school. And so as he had a chance to go off and then consider maybe what he wanted to do, I think it was really important for Baker, without putting words in his mouth, to kind of travel his own road, and didn't maybe necessarily see within our scheme or how we were going to use him that might suit him best. And so I gave him his release on the spot, saying, and I fully support it. This isn't absolutely what you want to do. So that's how it worked. And it might have, I think it was less than a week after he had returned home, but I'm not positive. You can verify the timeline.
Bronco, you talked about the influence of Coach Holliday, particularly with some of the non-LDS recruits and stuff. I just was wondering about the impact of some of the non-LDS players you've had on their team and the passion they've seemed to develop for your program and the impact that they've had.
Well, I think ultimately what we have done a good job, even before this staff, is, and what I really care about, is that young men know what they're getting into and what they're choosing. And if anything, I believe I over-educate in terms of what the standards really are and what it's going to be like. I try to make it seem a little bit daunting and to see if they'll push back and really want it. And what Coach Holliday and Coach Tujay and Coach Howell and Coach Atawaya and Coach and they've taken this approach that, Coach, we're lucky to be able to do that. And that's kind of transferred to these young men of saying, we get to. You don't have to, we get to. And this is what we want. And it's been fun because I didn't really promote that to the assistant coaches. They've actually come from other places and like it. And so that mindset permeates this to the players of, we're pretty lucky to be here. We're not having to do anything. We're lucky to do it. And so I think that mindset that these assistants have brought with them has influenced our current team and others to come.
Also, personally, what's your favorite part of the whole recruiting process?
Well, we did something a little bit different this year. What I'm realizing more and more is I love to win, and I love defensive football especially, and I love to be engaged in that. But really, I don't remember many of the statistics or records. What I've realized is I start remembering more of the people and the relationships. And so within our recruiting format this year, Holly and I kind of played a different role. And that might even be reflective in the program going forward of what I choose to do. But the lasting part of this, I think, ultimately is developing people and trust and relationships. And I'm realizing that I think I like that more than anything. As much as I like to win, and as much as I like to play great defense and run off-season programs and have kids develop and be tough, I love the relationship part. It's taken me kind of a while to sort that out. But I think that's, if I were to say right now what I like or love, that would be it.
In terms of number of players signed, maybe your smallest class since you've done this. That being said, and while it takes a long time to play out here at BYU, how do you assess this class, knowing what you think you know about these guys?
Might be the strongest in terms of ability and impact. Please write that I said might. As we know, time will tell, but I think we've done a really good job of knowing exactly what we're getting, especially on the athleticism and football particulars. I think we have a great idea of what we're getting there. And I think that we as an organization, and again with our player personnel component now that we've never had, with that going all, I'm going to say 24/7 because it is. I mean, and Jeff is not married, and so the social media and what he can do, that goes, I mean, I'm well asleep before, you know, they're whatever they're doing stops in terms of the twittering and stuff. And but having someone that is doing that all the time is really helpful. When you look at the quality, and it won't be hard for you to pull up clips and watch. I think that you'll see there have been other classes that have been highly heralded that maybe didn't pan out that way. I'm not as concerned about the fanfare, but I feel really good about what I think this class is capable of doing in relation to our program at this time. I'm pretty confident that we've done a good job. And how to rank it on a BYU class scale, I'm not sure. And on a national scale, I'm not sure how to rank it. But it's been a great day, not just a good day. I think it's been a great day.
Bronco, I believe you signed 4 in-state kids. Can you talk about the importance of recruiting in-state?
Yeah.
Has that changed with independence?
So the only thing that changed this year is the numbers that we could take. We always start in-state, and usually about a third of our class, I think if you'll go back and research, I think it's about a third of our class every year comes from in-state. So we started there again. But then we weren't afraid to go after we knew exactly what we were looking for and blanketed the state and saw who was interested and wanted to come to BYU. We did that first, and then we weren't afraid to go anywhere else to expand our recruiting base, and it will always be like that. It's not difficult to figure out when you have maybe the state that has the largest LDS population. That doesn't mean perfect people. That just means that are similar and familiar with our values. The likelihood that there's a fit there is great, and so we start there and then we expand, and that'll be the philosophy still going forward.
Coach, running back and quarterback were 2 areas maybe that weren't quite addressed in this class. So those will be focused maybe next year's class?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and it was kind of an oversight. At running back, we love our existing running backs. So Jamal Williams obviously coming back, Algie Brown obviously coming back, Adam Hine obviously coming back. That's 3. You don't really need more than 3 at one position, and then you go over to the fullback spot with Paul Asike and Yona Pritchard. We like where we are there, and so if we were to err, we were going to err on adding another wideout than adding another receiver for this class. We worked hard with Ammon Olson to actually work on helping him get a waiver because he wanted to go play and possibly have a chance to be the starter. There is still a possibility that there might be an addition to this class at quarterback over some point. I really won't or can't say anything more than that, but we will examine hard if we want that to happen. If not, we'll certainly address it for the following year.